Under the blinding stage lights, the sight was one that no army expected. Jin, the eldest member of BTS, lay visibly weakened, his usually bright presence replaced by an unsettling stillness. In that moment, the arena's electrifying energy turned into a deafening silence. Why was the heart of BTS suddenly so fragile? And what could have possibly driven Bang Si-hyuk, the very architect of BTS's success, and Jungkook, the youngest member, to tears that seemed impossible to hold back? The scene was as raw as it was alarming, leaving the audience and those watching through countless screens around the world grasping for answers. Witnesses described the shift as instantaneous. Moments before, Jin had been holding the microphone with his signature poise, his voice steady and commanding. Then, without warning, his shoulders slumped, his steps faltered, and an unusual stillness overtook him. Jungkook, positioned just meters away, was the first to react, his wide eyes betraying a mix of fear and disbelief. Bang Si-hyuk, watching from the sidelines, was seen covering his face briefly, as though unable to fully process the scene unfolding before him. This was no staged moment for dramatic flair. This was a fracture in the image of unshakable strength that BTS had carried for years. The reasons for Jin's sudden weakness remained cloaked in speculation, yet the visible distress among those closest to him was undeniable. Jungkook's voice cracked as he rushed toward his hyung, reaching out as though to steady him both physically and emotionally. Bang Si-hyuk, usually the embodiment of composure, had his gaze fixed on Jin, his expression frozen between urgency and helplessness. The cameras caught it all: the trembling hands, the unspoken exchanges, the growing ripple of concern across the crowd. What startled many was the emotional rawness of Jungkook's reaction. Known for his resilience on stage, he instead found himself wiping tears in full view of thousands, his jaw tightening as if willing himself to remain composed. The bond between him and Jin has been forged through years of relentless schedules, sleepless nights, and shared victories. To see that bond tested under such visible strain was to witness a chapter in BTS's story that no fan wanted to imagine. Every glance between them seemed to carry a silent plea: stay with us. Bang Si-hyuk's presence that night was already a point of interest for fans. The founder's attendance at the event was viewed as symbolic, perhaps even celebratory. Instead, he became an unwilling witness to one of the group's most vulnerable moments in years. Observers noted the way his expression shifted from pride to alarm, the way he leaned forward in his seat when Jin's movement slowed, and how his lips pressed into a thin line as Jungkook's voice faltered. For someone who has seen BTS weather countless storms, this moment seemed to pierce deeper. The audience's reaction was equally telling. At first, there was confusion. Perhaps some assumed it was part of the performance. But when the music softened and the members gathered around Jin with urgent expressions, an uneasy hush swept the stadium. Armies who had traveled across continents found themselves frozen, their light sticks lowered, their eyes fixed on the stage. The air was thick with questions no one dared to voice aloud. Was Jin in pain? Was this the end of the night? Could this be something far more serious? Those who have followed BTS long enough know that Jin's resilience is not to be underestimated. His military service, grueling world tours, and demanding public schedule have all been met with professionalism and grace. Yet even the strongest bodies have limits, and that night seemed to brush dangerously close to his. The way Jungkook hovered beside him, occasionally whispering, suggested both worry and a determination to shield him from the overwhelming gaze of the public. Bang Si-hyuk's eyes rarely left Jin, as though silently calculating the next steps in a moment that defied any rehearsed contingency plan. As the minutes ticked on, subtle exchanges between the members hinted at the complexity of the moment. A gentle hand on Jin's shoulder, a nod from Jungkook toward the wings of the stage, a fleeting glance from Bang Si-hyuk toward the event's coordinators. Each action carried weight, signaling that what was happening was more than a passing discomfort. The truth, however, remained locked within the tight circle of those who knew him best. What stands out most about that night is not just the image of Jin's weakened posture, but the emotional unraveling it triggered among those who rarely allow their vulnerabilities to surface in public. Band Si-hyuk's eyes glistening under the lights. Jungkook's trembling hand brushing his face, perhaps to wipe away a tear or to steady his breath. The collective stillness of a crowd unprepared for a reality in which their worldwide superstar could falter so visibly. For now, the questions linger, without clear answers. Was this an isolated moment born of exhaustion, or was it a signal of something more enduring? How will this affect the dynamic between the members and the group's momentum as a whole? Most importantly, what toll has the relentless pace of their careers taken on the man who has stood as one of their most dependable pillars? The sight of Bang Si-hyuk and Jungkook, united in visible grief, serves as a stark reminder that behind the polished performances are human beings whose limits can be reached in an instant. What happened that night may remain partially obscured, but the emotional aftershocks are certain to linger. Fans who were present described the moment as one that felt like the air was sucked out of the room. Those watching online replay the footage, searching for clues in every frame, hoping for signs that Jin's condition was temporary. Yet, the memory of that moment, of Jin's stillness, of Jungkook's tears, of Bang Si-hyuk's pained gaze, will not easily fade. It was a rare, unfiltered glimpse into the vulnerability of those who, to many, seem untouchable. If anything, the incident has left the world holding its breath. Until more is revealed, the image of a weakened Jin flanked by his youngest member and the man who built BTS will remain etched into the minds of millions. It is a reminder that even the brightest lights can flicker, and that sometimes the most powerful moments in music are not the songs themselves, but the silences in between. Under the harsh glare of the stage lights, Jin's figure became a focal point not because of the performance, but because of the sudden and undeniable shift in his condition. His usual posture, upright, commanding, filled with a quiet confidence, had given way to a faint slump of the shoulders and a hesitation in his movements that spoke volumes without a single word uttered. It was the kind of visual cue that any close observer would recognize instantly. Something was wrong, and in a heartbeat, the entire mood of the stadium shifted. The audience, primed for an evening of music and energy, now found themselves collectively holding their breath. Jungkook's reaction was almost instinctive. The youngest member, who has shared more than a decade of stages, rehearsals, and personal moments with Jin, seemed to move before conscious thought could even intervene. His eyes locked onto Jin's frame, searching for any sign of acknowledgement, any subtle gesture that could offer reassurance. But instead, he saw the opposite: a slowing pace, a deeper breath, and the kind of weariness that cannot be hidden from someone who knows you so well. The camera's lens, ever searching for moments of connection, caught Jungkook's hand tightening around his microphone, his other hand half extended as though he might step in at any second. Bang Si-hyuk, seated strategically where he could observe both the performance and the audience, did not have the protective veil of performance to shield him. His face was bare of the smiles and rehearsed expressions that often accompany public appearances. Observers noted the subtle shift in his posture, the slight lean forward, the tightening of his jaw, and a glance downward that seemed to momentarily break him from the image of an untouchable industry figure. His lips moved, though no one could hear the words. Whether they were spoken to himself or to those nearby, it was clear they carried urgency. The sound in the arena began to change. It wasn't the cheering or the rhythmic chanting of a typical BTS concert. It was a fragmented, uneasy murmur. Fans exchanged glances, trying to read the reactions of the members on stage. Some whispered, others simply stared, frozen by the feeling that something irreversible might be unfolding before their eyes. The usual ocean of purple light sticks wavered, their synchronized movements faltering as if the crowd had momentarily forgotten the choreography of fan support. When Jin finally turned slightly toward the group, it was evident to anyone watching that his energy was waning. The way he adjusted his stance, the pause between breaths, and the near imperceptible shift of weight from one leg to the other spoke of someone pushing through discomfort. Jungkook moved closer, his lips parting as though he might speak to him mid-performance. The intensity in his eyes revealed what he perhaps did not want the public to see: fear. Not stage fright, not performance anxiety. Fear for someone whose role in his life was more than just a bandmate. Bang Si-hyuk's hands rested on his knees, fingers flexing occasionally. For a man who has been at the epicenter of BTS's rise from a small agency act to a global powerhouse, moments of vulnerability from his artists were not entirely unfamiliar. But this was different. This was Jin, the steady eldest, the one who often carried the emotional balance of the group, showing signs of frailty that no amount of choreography or stagecraft could disguise. The symbolism was heavy, and Bang Si-hyuk's gaze reflected it. The crew backstage appeared to be on heightened alert. Shadows moved quickly just beyond the curtain line. A staff member spoke into a headset, eyes darting between the monitor and the stage. From the audience's perspective, these were peripheral details, easy to miss if one's focus was solely on the performers. But for those paying attention, these small actions added to the growing unease. Jungkook's composure cracked further as the performance went on. At one point, his voice wavered on a note that, under normal circumstances, would have been delivered with ease. His eyes glistened under the lights, and the glimmer wasn't from sweat. He bit his lower lip, the kind of unconscious gesture that betrays a struggle to maintain control. Fans close to the stage reported seeing him blink rapidly, as though fighting back tears that were dangerously close to spilling over. Bang Si-hyuk's reaction was less overt, but equally telling. His eyes narrowed, scanning Jin's every movement, perhaps assessing whether this was a moment that could be pushed through or one that demanded immediate intervention. For someone in his position, such decisions carry immense weight. Every second counts, and every choice must balance the health of the artist with the expectations of the audience. As the set continued, there was a noticeable shift in the dynamic on stage. Other members subtly closed ranks around Jin, their positions adjusting almost imperceptibly to keep him within a protective formation. It was choreography born not from rehearsal, but from instinct. Each time Jin moved, someone was near enough to steady him if needed. The glances exchanged among them were quick, but loaded with meaning. The emotional peak came when a brief pause in music allowed Jungkook to step closer. For a moment, they stood nearly shoulder to shoulder. Jungkook's lips moved, speaking words that were swallowed by the ambient noise, but his hand hovered near Jin's back in a gesture that was both supportive and ready. The audience saw it. Cameras captured it. And Bang Si-hyuk's head dipped slightly, as though even he could not watch without a pang in his chest. Fans around the world would later replay these moments, analyzing every frame for meaning. Was Jin ill? Was this exhaustion from the relentless pace of their schedules? Was it something more? Theories multiplied across social media, but the truth was known only to those on that stage and in that inner circle. What remained undeniable was the emotional toll it took on those present. The final song of the set was delivered with a tension that the crowd could feel but not fully name. Jin's voice carried, but there was a fragility beneath it, a strain that fans who have followed him for years would recognize instantly. Jungkook sang beside him, his own voice tinged with an emotion that made the lyrics land differently than they had in countless prior performances. Bang Si-hyuk, for his part, remained fixed in place, his hands clasped tightly enough that his knuckles whitened. When the lights finally dimmed and the applause roared back to life, there was relief, but it was tempered by the image of what had just unfolded. Jin walked off stage, flanked by his members, Jungkook closest to him, his hand briefly resting on Jin's arm. Bang Si-hyuk rose slowly from his seat, his eyes following until the last glimpse of Jin disappeared behind the curtain. The questions that remain are as pressing as they are unanswered. Was this merely a momentary lapse in strength, or a sign of something deeper? How will this affect the group's momentum in a year already packed with demands and expectations? And perhaps most importantly, how long can the relentless pace of global superstardom be maintained before it exacts a cost too great to bear? The night will be remembered not for its set list or its production, but for the human moment at its core. The image of Jin, unsteady yet still pushing forward, Jungkook's tears threatening to spill, and Bang Si-hyuk's silent watch will remain etched into the memory of every witness. It was a reminder that behind the music, the lights, and the flawless execution, there are limits. And on that night, the world saw them.